Hello and welcome to the Stamp Tool section of our course. In this section, we're going to learn about the Stamp Tool, which is located right here, and the Pattern Stamp Tool. In this lesson, we're going to go over the Clone Stamp Tool first, and both can be accessed with the letter S. The Stamp Tool does work just like a brush, so we can increase or decrease the brush size with our keyboard shortcuts, which are the left and right bracket keys. And then we do have some options up here that we can apply to that stamp tool as well. So this particular image is located in your resources folder if you want to follow along or to practice what you learn once you go through this lesson. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of these options up here, and then I'll go ahead and show you how to use this tool and give you some tips and techniques for using it. So a lot of these options we've gone over before in previous lessons, so I'm just going to do a quick overview in case you didn't go through any of those other lessons. So here we have our stamp tool, and then we have no tool presets defined for this current tool. And if you're not seeing that, it's probably because you have this turned off and this is what you have. So don't worry about that. There's nothing really in here for this particular tool. All our other options are right here. So from here we can access some options for adjusting our brush size, the hardness, and choosing other types of brush tips. When it comes to using the stamp tool, I prefer just using a soft round or hard round brush tip depending on what I'm trying to retouch. Here we can access our brush settings. Alright, so right next to that we do have a new tool option that we haven't talked about previously because it's only available for the stamp tool as well as our healing brush tools. So once you click on that, you're going to get a new panel. It's called Clone Source. And I can try and explain what it does, but it'd be better to show you. So we're going to go over this in this lesson once I begin to show you how to use the tool, and then it's going to make much more sense versus me trying to explain what it does. Okay, so next to that we have some options for using our blending modes. We can adjust the opacity. This option here is for those that use tablets. Flow, again, flow will allow you to build up your brush strokes or the amount of ink or pixels being applied to a certain area. We have our airbrush tool, again, another tool for our tablets. And then aligned, you can either activate or deactivate. And I'm going to show you how that works because it's going to be easier to show you versus explaining it. And then sample, this is what you're going to use when you're working non-destructively. So if you're working directly on your background layer, then you're not going to really need to worry about the sample layers. If you're working non-destructively and you're adding layers to work on versus the background layer directly, then you're going to want to adjust some of these options in here. And I'm going to show you again how that works in just a minute. And this also works with the sample layers as well. And then finally, we do have our last option here, which is again for the pressure for your mouse cursor when being applied with a tablet. Alright, so let me show you how to use this tool and explain some of these other options up here as well so you get a better idea of what you can do with this particular tool. Now, as I mentioned previously, we're using a brush in order to use the stamp tool. So what exactly can we do with the stamp tool? Well, the stamp tool is used to do retouching. So you can sample or copy from other areas of your image to cover up other areas, or you can use it to duplicate as well. So let me show you how to use it to remove something. So let's say we have these three pelicans and we want to get rid of one of them, or maybe you have a portrait and the person has a lot of blemishes on their face. Well, you can use this stamp tool the same way to remove blemishes. In order to copy or sample from a specific area on your image, the first thing you need to do is you need to tell Photoshop, okay, we want to copy from here. Now to do that, we have to hold down our Alt or Option key, and when we do, our icon changes from a round brush to a target icon. So you can take that target icon anywhere on your image that you want to sample from, or to tell Photoshop, clone or copy from here. Once you get that icon, click in that area you want to clone from. I just clicked right here, and then you will notice inside the brush, the area that you're copying or sampling from will be added to the inside of the brush. Kind of hard to see right now, but it's there, and it's kind of like an overlay. So if I go over this pelican right here, we can see what's inside the brush now, which is a copy of this area over here. And now I can click and brush over that area to remove that bird. So I'm going to undo that with Command or Control and the letter Z. Now, in order to copy this bird, we do the same thing. We hold down our Alt or Option key, take the target icon and click on the bird, and now we've just sampled that area with our brush, and when I move it, we're going to get an overlay that we sampled. So now I can click and I add the bird, but we didn't add the entire bird. We're missing part of the bird. And that's because we need to paint that entire area. So when I do, wherever I clicked, it's kind of hard to see, but there's a little plus icon under that bottom bird right there. And that's where Photoshop is cloning from. So if I continue up here in this area, we can see that plus icon is being applied to the bottom of that area, and it's sampling that area to clone our image from, and then it adds it to where I'm applying it in the brush up here. So if we undo that, you can see where I applied the brush. So two things. One, I have a line selected, and when you have a line selected, you can continue painting based on the distance between where you sampled and where you're applying it. So I'm going to sample this bird, and I'm going to go way up here and add them up here. Now look at where the plus icon is under the bird. It's sampling and cloning from that area. If I move down here, look how far that plus icon is now compared to where it was when we first sampled this bird. So aligned will keep the distance between where you clone or sample from and where you apply the brush exactly the same as you continue working on the document. So let's go ahead and turn that off. And this time it's going to work differently. So I'm going to sample this bird again. I'm going to place the bird up here. And then when I release and go to paint somewhere else, it's still cloning from that same area. It's not cloning from a new place. So back again, aligned, turned on, sampled, bird, move, and now I'm not cloning the bird like we did over here. So that's the difference between aligned, activated, and deactivated. All right, let me show you clone source. We're going to turn on this clone source panel, and we can see right here this first icon is selected. And it says o27.jpg, which is just basically the file name. Okay, and if we take a look at what's inside of the brush, there's nothing inside of the brush right now. There's actually just the tan area with all the different pixels inside of it. But if we click on this icon here, we can see that the overlay is completely different. If I click on this icon, there's nothing inside of it because we have not applied a cloned area to this icon here. So these are like presets that you can save your cloned areas from into these areas so you don't have to go back and retarget them as a cloned source. So I can come over here with my Alt or Option key and click on this bird, and now this icon will have that cloned area in the brush, and I can always go back to a different one to select a different cloned area from the image. So this helps speed up your workflow when you're retouching your images and you're working in different areas. Instead of going back and retargeting another area, maybe you want to reuse an area that you've targeted before and you need that exact precise location. Well, you can save them within the clone source. The other thing we can do, actually I'm going to make this brush larger so I can clone this entire bird. And the other thing we can do is we can actually turn off this show overlay, and now the bird is gone. And this helps with retouching when what you are applying or targeting or cloning is getting in the way of retouching. So you can turn on or off the overlay if needed. The other thing you can do is you can rotate what's inside of that cloned area by adjusting this number right here. So as you can see, I just rotated that bird, and now when I apply that cloned area, it's going to be rotated. So again, this helps you align your cloned areas with other areas that you're retouching with, and makes it much easier versus trying to do it with other tools and techniques. So it's just another quick way of helping you retouch. All right, I'm going to go ahead and go back to the original image again, because the one thing we want to do is we want to work non-destructively. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer. And if I wanted to retouch an image and say get rid of 2 of the 3 pelicans, I use my Alt or Option key and then I paint over that area. But if I do it on the original background layer and I come back tomorrow and I decide I want those birds back, well, if I saved it as a JPEG file, guess what? You're not going to get those birds back or whatever it is that you removed. So working non-destructively will allow you to still remove the objects or the blemishes or whatever it is you want to remove, but do so non-destructively. So right now, I just applied those edits to this layer here, but we can see in the thumbnail that those birds are still there. So if I turn this off, we can see that the birds are still intact in the original layer. So it's just covering up the areas that we retouched, but doing it on a separate layer. And then when you save it as a PSD file, that gives you the option to make adjustments later on if needed. Now, in order to work with these new layers, you want to make sure that you have all layers selected for the sample option. If you have current layer only, then it's not going to work. You can see that the icon is changed and it's not going to allow us to make any changes. So if you're seeing that, that's why you're not able to make any adjustments yet. So current layer would be, if you have 10, 15, 20 different layers, well, you can go through and sample through different layers. If you just want to work on a specific layer, then you're going to select current layer and below. In this case, we only have 2 layers, so it is only going to sample from this one. But if we had 20 more layers up here or below it, then we could select all layers. So depending on what you're trying to retouch and how many layers you have, you may need to come up here and make sure that you have either current and below or all layers. All right, so that's it for the stamp tool. In the next lesson, I'm going to give you a brief overview of the pattern stamp tool.